seated. Our gospel reading today is from John chapter 1, verses 1 through 9. In the beginning there was the Word. The Word was in God's presence, and the Word was God. The Word was present to God from the beginning. Through the Word all things came into being, and apart from the Word nothing came into being that has come into being. In the Word was life, and that life was humanity's light. A light that shines in the darkness, a light that the darkness has never overtaken. Then came one named John, sent as an envoy from God, who came as a witness to testify about the light, so that through his testimony everyone might believe. He himself wasn't the light. He only came to testify about the light, the true light that illumines all mankind, humankind. The Word was coming into the world. Holy wisdom, holy word.
Thanks be to God. Good morning.
All right. Well, I'm eager to be having this conversation with you all, and I'm going to share a little bit this morning about why language for how we talk about God, what theologian Rosemary Radford Ruether initially coined God talk. I'm excited to talk about God talk with you all. I'll start with a story. It's a story from my youth when I was in high school. And some of you know, but some of you don't, that I went to a private evangelical Christian high school. And so all of our ways of being were informed by the way that our school saw what behavior should be from a Christian perspective, from their Christian perspective. And when I was a sophomore in high school, we had a new requirement that came down around dress policy. That was no spaghetti straps for girls. And of course, and then, there was two, like probably other folks that had this one, no shorts or skirt that's above your fingertip. And, we could talk about whether or not that is a useful rule. But what I'm interested in is that this rule was connected to God's will. It was connected to a worldview about women's roles and women's bodies, their roles in the world as subservient to male. And of course, this is in a context as well where in that context, we only understood the world as having two genders, and that those genders are aligned with the sex assigned at birth, right? Let's see. So I'm going to use men and women in that framework for this story. So women's roles as wives and as mothers and as belonging to their fathers and their husbands. And that was connected to this concept of God as the Father. In the same way, in this theological worldview, that God was the Father for everyone and everything, and the creator, the supporter, right? We were expected to mirror this in our own lives, with men being the leaders in our communities and in our households. So this very much informed my sense of self and my relationship to my body. Of course, let's see. Well, it really informed my sense of worth as a person for a long time, which was defined by being a good woman, and a good wife, a good mate, a good potential mate, which was connected to obedience to a male leader. Regardless of whether or not what that male leader was saying made sense to me, as long as it was connected back to God's will, that was expected. Any gifts that I had were to be used in one way, in service of home life and raising children, which are beautiful things. And I felt and feel called to more than that in addition to my home life. So this concept and this way of framing God as a father nested inside of patriarchy informed a worldview that shifted, and then tying it right to God's will, shifted the way that our community interacted with each other. That's, I believe, a big part that I'm trying to give an example of why it's important when we're talking about God to be specific about what we're trying to describe. Even if we're going to invoke, right, language like father, can we be specific about what we mean and what we're trying to describe? We're talking about really an experience of the divine. So I'm going to ask us all to, if you feel comfortable, you might like to close your eyes, but really to call back to a time for you, a memory, that you felt a connection to the sacred, a connection to the divine. It might be sunrise. It might be a meaningful conversation with a friend. It might be being in a community when something really real or meaningful is happening. And maybe something's coming to mind and maybe not, and that's okay too if nothing is coming to mind. But that quality of that feeling of connected to something more, that's something beyond, that's that description of, that's that ineffable quality of what we're trying to get at when we talk about God. You can stay with your eyes closed if you want to stay in that space, but I'm gonna keep talking a little bit. A lot of what I'm sharing today is I'm using my source material is Marcus Borg, The Heart of Christianity, written in 1989, now a classic, right? But he says that when people are asking about, is God real or not? With the existence of God as a larger being, he thinks that what we're actually asking is there something more beyond what we understand? And I think that folks in the recovery community can also teach us not necessarily, do you believe in a higher power, but are you in control? Am I in control? No. Do I know everything? If your answer to those questions is no, then there might be something more. So what we're trying to do then is we're trying to use words that can describe God, because our words inform our worldview and our lens through which we experience our lives, our reality, our sense of what is even possible. And when we understand that we can actually shape our reality and what we understand as possible through the use of our language as one tool, we can also shape change in the wider world. So Christianity is still, for now, the dominant religious worldview in our country and worldwide. And I think that the dominant way that, at least in the United States, folks understand Christianity is through Marcus Borg calls it supernatural theism. It favors biblical literalism, a God that intervenes in the world, that can, act and do things, create miracles, stop, disasters from happening. This God is also kind of far away and human-like. Who here has thought about, that God up in the clouds that looks like Poseidon, with a white beard and is like holding a scepter? Like, that's still in my mind, right? It's this monarchical idea of God. And often that idea of a faraway God, who's kind of human-like and can take action in the world. There are requirements for how we're supposed to be and rewards when we are obedient to those requirements. So some might say, well, it's biblical. You can find these examples in the Bible of this kind of God. Yes. It's not the only way that we find God in the Bible or in our tradition, our Christian tradition. I think that, again, when we think about these requirements being tied to God's will, one piece that is really, really crucial for us to understand is that then becomes really ripe for control and manipulation. In the same way that what girls wore in my high school was tied to God's will. We can see that throughout all of our culture and our society. So it's important for us to be intentional and for us to be specific. And we're seeing that and the consequences of that now, as Christian nationalism and these ways of talking about God are tied to our current administration. And our current administration can remove the leader of a separate sovereign nation and then demand obedience to his decision. We cannot question it. Or if it's tied, right? If we take it from God's will is this, then this, then this. This is a problem. This is a problem. Hearing all of this, it makes sense why so many people might say, I'm just ready to leave religion from the get-go. That makes sense to me. That's a reasonable response. And for those of us who are still finding ourselves in this room here on a Sunday morning, we perhaps might see and understand religion as one way that humanity attempts to connect with God and to describe God. We can build spiritual practices and create language and ways of understanding God together. Humans were social creatures. We're meant to be in community with each other, and we experience life together, and we experience God together. So it makes sense too that religions are formed because of our need for community. When we have those moments of touching the divine, sometimes we want to share that with others. Sometimes those moments come because we are in community with others. So spirituality can build our individual resilience, but collective spirituality together, when institutionalized, becomes religion, that can actually build our collective resilience. It allows us to grieve together, to make meaning together, to remember together, to create change together. Bless you, Arvella. Our task as inheritors of this religion as inheritors of this religion is then to steward our tradition away from being manipulated by forces that would use it for power and domination. So yes, for better and for worse, Christianity has shaped our worldview and has shaped every single one of us sitting in this room this morning. Our presence here is evidence of that, whether or not we choose to identify as Christian. Growing up in a culture in which Christian is the dominant spiritual framework means that we do have to work with and process this content to find a new way, a different way of relating to God. So, I think we can choose different spiritual language. And one way of thinking about this that Marcus Borg suggests is called panentheism, an alternative to, what was it called? The other theism, the supernatural theism. Like God is Triton in the clouds. Poseidon, I mean. Okay, Greek myths, right. Okay. So it's important to know, I think, that when the Enlightenment took place, right, of course, our whole way as humanity of thinking about the universe shifted. Previous to the Enlightenment, we thought about the universe as very small. We thought that the sky at night was a dome stretched over the earth. And of course, when we learned that that wasn't the case, it shifted everything. So that's why at the previous to the Enlightenment, people understood God to be both far away and close, near, in everything, among everything, in you, in me, between us, amongst us. We find this in the Bible as well. Let's see. The one in which we live and move and have our being, Acts. We also might look to our own text today, 1 John. I think that John was trying to, right, put some language to that ineffable quality of the sacred. Let's see. John himself wasn't the light. He only came to testify about the light, the true light that illumines all mankind. The Word was coming into the world. It's like the Word, the light, Word made flesh. This is all very poetic, trying to, right, speak to a truth that's beyond words. So pantheism, yes, is this idea that understands God as separate from us, but also within us and among us and through all things and all of the universe, all beings, everything. I think too, there's the supernatural theism, and then there's the rewards and the requirements, remember? There's another way that we can frame, and I'm really putting these as like, one option or the other. Maybe there's something of a spectrum or a constellation. But when we think too about the character of God, rather than rewards and requirements, Salt and Light and Central Lutheran are Lutheran congregations, saved by grace through faith. So we can invoke this idea of grace and transformation. And rather than a threat that's being made if we do not do the requirement, instead we have an invitation into transformation through this knowledge of grace and love that God already knows us and loves us exactly as we are. That's the grace that's available to us. And that's the transformation that we are called into, to returning to that wholeness that already exists within each of us. All right, well, I think I've talked long enough. Thank you. But so what I'd like to do, for our one-to-ones, So if this is your first time here at Salt and Light with our friends at Central Lutheran, we profoundly believe that the wisdom of this ineffable God is within each of us, not just the person who's standing here and talking at you for a long time. So we invite us to turn to each other and talk a little bit about what spoke to you today. We have one-to-ones, and we're going to have a lot of one-to-ones over this next season about how we talk about God, our God talk. And this is really important in our community right now, and it's really important in the world right now. So my prompt for your one-to-ones, which are always optional, we may not always feel like today is the day for it. We also might feel like I just showed up here and I don't know any of you. And grab yourself a coffee or a tea. We have a beautiful garden that you can take a walk through. You can also sit and breathe. Or you can turn to a neighbor and share about that moment that you thought of, or any moment where you felt the presence of the divine moving through your life. And then use that moment as a way to think about, how might I describe God? What words might I use? What names might I want to invoke to be able to describe the one with whom you made contact in that moment? Okay, so I will call you back in like 7 minutes-ish, and we'll talk about our conversations at that time. Thank you.